Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform where creatives can stand out with their online presence. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca, otherwise known as Hypnot Hooray Online, and this is podcast episode 22. So in this podcast episode, I have one finished object to share, which you would have seen if you saw my last video. I have updates on a few of my whips, I have some new projects that I wanted to share, and I have one major acquisition which I wanted to start with because it relates to a few of my whips and new projects that I wanted to chat about later. So I thought I would start with that just for flow of this video. So I recently got a sewing machine. I got the Brother XR3774. I'll put a little photo of the machine here because so far I'm really enjoying it as a beginner sewist, and it doesn't seem to be a super popular machine compared to like the Singer heavy duty sewing machine that I've seen a lot online, but this one seems to be really good and I'm really enjoying it so far. So I got this machine because I have really been wanting to learn how to sew, and it just seems like a really practical and useful skill to have. I want to be able to sew my own garments, but also just repair things and mend things that I've worn a lot. So I decided to get a machine. I was using my mom's machine to practice sewing, but my mom kind of made it known at the beginning when I took her machine that she really wants this machine back because I have a bit of a habit of taking my mom's things and then never returning them to her. So she's like, okay, you can use this to practice, but just please return it. So I was like, okay. So I was practicing some stitches on it. I never really made a full-on project with her machine, but I was practicing a lot of the basics and using a lot of scrap fabric to just learn techniques, and I was really enjoying it. It seems like a skill that I'll definitely want to do long term, so I thought, okay, I'll just get my own machine now with everything that I kind of want in a machine. So the Brother machine that I got, it has a lot of the features that just seem really practical to me, so I decided to just go for it, and it's relatively affordable. I paid around $250 after tax, and it has a drop-in bobbin with a clear cover, so I think it makes it really easy to tell how much thread is left in your bobbin. It's just an easy process to be able to put the bobbin in. It has thread cutters. It has a automatic needle threader, which is something that my mom's machine didn't have, but it's been really useful. The machine has all the basic stitches. It's a mechanical machine, not a computerized machine, and I've just been really enjoying it so far. I'm really happy with it. I do wish that I waited about a month or so before getting this machine. I was really impatient when I got it. I was doing some research and then I just decided, you know what, I really like this machine, I'm gonna get it. But if I waited just a month, I would have been able to go to Downtown Sewing, which is a new sewing space in Toronto in the Queen West neighborhood. It's kind of like a sewing workshop space. They do sewing repairs and they also sell machines, and they have the machines out on display so you can try them out before you buy them, and they have a few beginner friendly, pretty affordable machines. So I kind of wish that I waited. It just opened this past weekend. I think on May 17th was their grand opening. So it's a very new sewing studio. It seems like a great space for beginner sewists, or if you're a sewist in general and you live in Toronto, a place to definitely check out. So I kind of wish that I waited, but still really happy with that machine. I also got some fabric as well from the thrift store because I just really want to practice making garments, but I didn't want to invest in some really nice fabric as I'm still learning and making a lot of mistakes because the learning curve is really steep. So I got some white flat sheets. One of them is 100% cotton, and then the other one is a cotton and linen blend. So I got these, and then I got this really cute bright green gingham, which is 2 curtain panels. There's no fabric like composition label on it, so I don't really know what it is. It's probably cotton or maybe even polyester, but it was a really cute print, so I decided to get them, and all of this was under $20. So I can definitely make several garments with all of this fabric that I have here, and these sheets are not the best for clothing, I would say. The drape isn't that great, but I think it's going to be great to be able to practice on this fabric here, and it's still very nice quality, and I got all of this, as I mentioned, for under $20. This is still going to be almost an exclusively knitting channel, but I did want to add a sewing segment at the end of podcast episodes if I get up to any sewing, just to document the process of me learning how to sew. And I've also shared some stories on Instagram of learning how to sew, and people seem to be really interested in learning how to sew themselves. So hopefully I can share some of the mistakes that I've made, things that I've learned as a complete beginner. So that's been really fun. It hasn't come as naturally to me as I thought. Maybe I was a bit overconfident, but I have made a lot of mistakes so far. I get very overwhelmed and overstimulated when sewing. I can only really sew for maybe, or do sewing related tasks for maybe like an hour or two before I need to quit and I need to take a bit of a break. And by a break, I mean like a week or two long break before getting back into it. It's been very overwhelming, but I know it's going to be a really rewarding skill to learn. So I'll probably have segments in this podcast episodes or in future podcast episodes. And if you're not interested, you can just skip ahead. So that was my first and only acquisition to share. And I guess we can get into finished objects, but before that, I wanted to chat about Squarespace, who is the sponsor of today's video. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform with everything you need to build a website, sell products, offer services, and market your business. I've been using Squarespace to design my own website. You can use Blueprint AI, which is Squarespace's AI-enhanced website builder, or you can pick from one of the many professionally designed templates to fully customize. One of the main pages that I wanted on my website was a recent knits page to show finished pieces at a glance, and then you can click into each one of them to read a little review. I created this one with one of the suggested blog layouts in my website template and was able to upload these photos and text with drag and drop editing. You can also customize the layout based on desktop and mobile views, so each layout looks exactly how you want it. So check out squarespace.com for that free trial and to check out all of these features. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/hypknithooray and use the code hypknithooray to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And again, thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. And with that, we can get on to finished objects. So the first finished object, or the first and only one that I have to share, is the Lakes cardigan. I was part of the test knit group for this design, which was released last month in mid-April. The Lakes cardigan is a top-down saddle shoulder construction V-neck cardigan that's knit with worsted weight and mohair yarn on. The suggested needle size is 5mm or 5.5mm needles, and I used a 5mm needle. The cardigan is a little bit of a denser and heavier fabric, so I've kind of been wearing it more like a spring jacket. I'll put it on right now, and this is going to look exactly like my finished object photos because I was wearing this blouse as well then, but I really like wearing this cardigan with a white blouse underneath. I think it's a really nice crisp look. So this is how the cardigan looks on me. I really enjoyed knitting the cardigan. It has a really nice intuitive process. In terms of the pattern, I have no complaints. I love the way that Haley, the designer behind Ozetta, writes her patterns. She has really useful schematics, very detailed but still concise instructions that are really easy to read. She has tips that are integrated throughout and video tutorials, so no complaints about the pattern at all. I had a really enjoyable time knitting this. In terms of the fit, I have two comments that I have about this cardigan, but I also filmed a project vlog for this cardigan here, so I would also recommend checking that out if you haven't already and you want to hear a little bit more. But the two things that I wanted to chat about today in this podcast episode is the fit of the neckband, because that's one thing that I don't really like about this cardigan, and the sleeves. So the collar here and the neckband are added on afterwards. You pick up stitches for the neckband here first, and then you work the 1x1 rib outwards, and then you cast off. And then after that, you pick up stitches for the front button bands along the side of that neckband, and then down on both sides. Or maybe it's the other way, but basically you work the neckband first, and then you do the button fronts. And I sized down 1.25 millimeter needles, or 3 needle sizes down, to work the neckband here. And I did it because I initially just sized down half millimeter, or 1 needle size down, and I just felt like the fabric was really thin and already very loose, so I decided to size down more, and I'm glad that I did. And if anything, I would have sized down even more. So I knit this neckband on 3.75 millimeter needles. I would have sized down even more because it has really stretched out with wear. I've been wearing this cardigan a lot. Hopefully you can tell in video right now that it is a little bit wide, and if I don't button the cardigan up when I wear it outside, it usually just falls off of my shoulders. So I would say that the shoulder and neckband here is a little bit too wide for at least my body proportions. So I am going to thread some elastic through the neckband to kind of get it to cinch in a little bit more. And some really helpful people have left some comments on my project vlog to reinforce the neckband also with a crochet chain. I've never really done that before, but looks really promising, so may also try that. I think I would have done that right after casting off the project because it's already stretched out a little bit. So if you are knitting this cardigan, I would recommend reinforcing the neckband. I think just because the button fronts and the cardigan is a little bit heavy, so it's just weighing down the neckband here and really stretching it out. So that's one thing that I don't really like about this design, but I think easily fixed with either the elastic or the crochet chain. And then the other thing is the sleeve length. So I knit this cardigan all to pattern because I was a test knitter for this design, but it does, the sleeves I do find are a little bit too short for my liking. I would have liked, because I'm wearing this as more of a jacket, to have it fit more like maybe 3 centimeters longer, so it's kind of like at the top of my palm, or the beginning of my fingers. I think I would have preferred that a little bit more. But other than those two things, I really enjoyed knitting this cardigan. The yarn that I used is this unknown vintage yarn from my grandma's stash. I think it's 100% wool, but I'm not really sure what the brand is. So I used that, and Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair in the shade Dark Mousse. And I do really like the color combination of those two yarns together. I'm gonna do this more in the future, where I'm gonna pair the same shade of yarn but just different tones. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, or the same like opacity, just different tones, because the Dark Mousse mohair is more of a cooler tone brown, and then the wool worsted weight yarn that I use is more of a warm tone brown, but they're both equally as dark, just different tones. One is more warm tone and one is more cool toned, and I think it creates a really nice marl, like a very subtle marl along the fabric. It adds a lot of dimension without one of the yarns overpowering the other. So I really like that type of combination of colors, and I'm going to definitely do that more in the future. I ended up going to the knitting loft to pick up a 5th skein of the Knitting for Olive mohair, because I thought I would need more, but I ended up using just under 4 balls of the Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair. So this cardigan, I was able to knit with just under 900 meters of each strand of yarn. But I'm just gonna keep that yarn because I also have some of the wool left over as well, so I'll just do like a smaller project in the future. But yeah, I ended up only needing 4 balls of the Knitting for Olive mohair, and it's holding up really well. I really enjoyed it. So that is my first finished object, and I'm going to take off the cardigan because it is very warm today, and then we can get into whips. So the first whip that I wanted to share is my Peacock cardigan. This honestly could have been a finished object, but I just wasn't really motivated to work on it very much. I only really started working on it in the last week or so. And I'm really hoping I can finish it in the next podcast episode because it's been a whip for several months. But the Peacock cardigan is a pattern by Lulu. It's a top-down round yoke and raglan construction sweater that has lace motif along the top, and it's the rest of the cardigan is just stockinette, and it has pretty fitted sleeves and a straight down body. So the yarn that I'm using is Hitsuji Chan natural yarn from Omomo and Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in the shade Hazel. Since my last podcast episode, I finished the second sleeve. I modified the decrease rate for that, and I added length to the body, and I cast off the body with that short 1x1 rib. And then now I am dealing with the button band. I think the reason why I wasn't really motivated to work on this cardigan is because I didn't really know what exactly I wanted to do with the button band here. Because the pattern calls for a horizontal 1x1 rib button band, so you pick up stitches and then you work 1x1 rib outwards. But I just found that in working the 1x1 rib along the sleeves and the body hem, it's just not super neat. And if you've seen any of my past videos, you will know that I really don't like a messy 1x1 rib. So this was already kind of bothering me, and I didn't want that. I didn't want it to look like this along the button band. So I decided to do a double knit button band, but it took a bit of time for me to figure out the construction and how I wanted to do it, because I wanted to do a thin double knit button band. So I am following the Kimmy Moncombe Petite Knit double knit button band tutorial, where you work the button band and the buttonholes without breaking your yarn. But I'm doing a few modifications to make it work for this cardigan. So the first modification is my button band here is only 9 stitches wide. I think the tutorial it's 11 or 13 stitches, and I'm making it a bit of a thinner button band because the buttons for this cardigan are only 13 millimeters in diameter. So working a thinner button band here, but you can do a double knit button band like this with buttonholes as long as you have an odd number of stitches. So that's the first modification. The second is I'm working the buttonholes, which are along this side, to be smaller, so only 2 rows of double knitting in height, or 4 total rows of double knitting, because again, the buttons are going to be smaller. I haven't tested it yet with the buttons. I probably should have done that, but I didn't. But I think it's going to be okay. I ended up working less rows for that. And then the third thing is, because this cardigan is a higher crew neck, the double knit button band doesn't go all the way around the cardigan. It's just going to be on the 2 fronts here like that. And then I'm going to pick up stitches along the top for a 1x1 rib neckband or neckline. So to do this, I first did the double knitting section here with the buttonholes, and I picked up stitches and then I worked it in this direction here. So I worked this double knit button band to have 6 buttonholes here, because the 7th one is going to be in the 1x1 rib along the top. So I did that in this direction, but then I realized with the second a double knit button band here, which is just worked in straight double knitting, because this is where I'm going to sew on the buttons, I had to pick up stitches, and I'm working the double knit button band down in this direction. So I just had to flip directions, but I think it looks the same. You can't really tell the direction of knitting because it's in stockinette. So I think it works okay, but that kind of confused me at the beginning, because the tutorial, I would say for most double knit button bands, are for a V-neck, so you just have to work one. So it took a little bit of figuring out for me to be able to figure out what I was doing. But yeah, I'm halfway through the double knit button band here. I just have a little bit more to go, and then I'll do the neckband, and then this cardigan is going to be finally finished. So really enjoying that so far. I really like the button band here. I'm sizing down to 3mm needles, so 2 needle sizes down. I knit the body of this cardigan on 4mm needles. So yeah, that's where I'm at with this cardigan, and hopefully in my next podcast episode, this will be a finished object. My next WIP, which has taken up a lot of my time because I've really enjoyed working on it, is the Tulip Looped Sweater by Other Loops. I'm using Knit Picks palette and Aloft, both in the shade Tarragon, and this is where I'm at so far. So the Tulip Loop Sweater is a top-down drop shoulder sweater that's worked in a textured stitch with 3x2 rib panels. and then a wide tulip loop cable motif. I think in my last podcast episode, I had just had the back panel worked, or like a portion of the back panel. And then I said I was going to block it to see how the finished fabric looks, because I'm knitting this off gauge. So I think the pattern calls for a DK weight yarn on 4.5 millimeter needles. And I'm using fingering and mohair on 3.75. So I've sized up to a size medium, or I'm following the size medium stitch counts, but it's going to fit more like an extra small or a small, I would say. So I wanted to block the back panel to make sure that I actually liked the finished fabric and it wasn't too thin. So I blocked that back panel here. It might be kind of hard to tell because it's scrunched up again at the bottom, but I did block the back panel, and I'm really liking the finished drape, and the combination of Knit Picks palette and a loft is just great, especially for textured stitches. The palette just really blooms and just fills in all of the gaps after blocking. So I did that and I ended up really liking it. So I have worked about half or maybe 2/3 of the body now. And for the body, I ended up casting on some more stitches, even more stitches than what the pattern calls for at the underarm, because I want this sweater to be even wider along the body. So for the sweater along the back and the front panels, you're working some increases here in 3x2 rib to add some more width to the body. And for the size medium, you don't need to cast on any stitches before joining the front and the back together, but I decided to cast on some stitches, just a few, to widen the body even more. I cast on 5 stitches to maintain the 3x2 rib pattern here, which is different than the stitch counts in the pattern for other sizes where you're supposed to cast on stitches, but I'm thinking it's because I had to modify, I think, the back panel. I had to cast on 1 more stitch. I don't really know, but I ended up casting on 5 stitches to maintain this stitch pattern here, and it's working out. So I have the body to work, and I think once I finish these 2 here, I'm going to work the neckband, which is in 1x1 twisted rib. One last thing that I also wanted to mention is for the cables here, I've been using a stitch holder as my cable needle. So these cables here are, you probably don't need a cable needle to work them because they're so infrequent and they're pretty small. But I like using a needle because it just keeps the cables a little bit more tight and uniform. But I found that I really like using a stitch holder like this for my cable needle, because you can slide the stitches on and then you can have them rest here like this. So they're a little bit more secure than a cable needle, which sometimes is just a straight needle. So they're secure on this, and then after you put them back on your needle and you're done cabling, or you're done your cable row, with a stitch holder like this, you can just pin it back onto your work. And I just always have my cable needle with me when I'm out and about and I'm taking this project on the go. I don't have to remember to bring this with me. It's always attached to my project. So I like to work cables like that. That's usually how I work cables in other projects too. But you don't really need it for this sweater, but I have been doing it. So that's the progress on my tulip loop. Really enjoying this color for spring. And then the next whip that I wanted to share is my Lulu Slipover by Petite Knit. So this slipover here is it's not the Lulu Slipover, sorry, it's the Lulu Slipover Chunky, because I'm working with worsted weight yarn. So the Lulu Slipover is a top-down contiguous shoulder construction slipover that's worked entirely flat except for the neckband here, because this is the back and then this is the front, and they're going to be attached with a double knit button band here with 2 buttons. And since my last podcast episode, I have finished working the front panel. I think that's where I was at my last podcast episode. I worked the 1x1 rib armholes on both sides, and I added the neckband here. And for the neckband, the pattern calls for a pretty thick and tall turtleneck for this slipover, but I knew that I didn't want to do that because the yarn that I'm using here is Briggs & Little Regal, which is a worsted weight 2-ply pretty rustic yarn. It's not itchy, but it's just very rough. I haven't blocked this project yet, so I don't know if it's going to soften up a lot after blocking. Actually, no, I did block my tiny swatch and it didn't really change a ton after blocking. So I knew I didn't want to do a turtleneck, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a single layer of 1x1 rib or do a double folded collar. I decided to go with the double folded collar because I just think that it has a more polished look, and also the double folded collar I knit and then I just cast off and did like a knit bind off to the cast on edge here. So if I decide to do a single layer collar, which I may very well do, I kind of have to finish everything and then see, because I feel like it just looks a little bit awkward right now, the fabric without blocking, so it's kind of hard to tell how it's gonna look. But I'm just gonna block everything, and if I decide to do a single layer collar instead, I can just undo this bind off really easily and just rip back a few rows and then do a tubular bind off, versus if I started with the single layer, I would have to undo the tubular bind off and then add rows. So yeah, I still haven't fully decided, but I ended up going with the double folded collar for now, and then I'm going to work the double knit buttonholes here. I was debating whether or not I actually wanted to add the buttonholes or just do like a faux buttonhole here and then just seam the sides together, because I feel like the slipover doesn't need to detach at the sides here to be practical. Like you can just slip it on over top because the armholes are so wide. So I don't really know if the buttonhole is super useful, but I just figured because there's going to be 2 buttonholes here, or 2 buttons, having actual buttonholes kind of allow you to decide how you want to wear the slipover, if you want them both buttoned or if you want it a little bit looser and just button one at the top. So I think I'm just going to still work the buttonhole, but that was kind of a thought that I was seriously considering with the slipover, but I'm just going to work it to pattern, might as well. So that's where I'm at with the Lulu slipover. I'm thinking that I'm still going to be able to wear it even though it's quite warm, because I did more of a crew neck and I'll just wear like a cotton t-shirt underneath. So I'm still hopeful that I'll be able to wear this sometime in the next few months. Otherwise, this will just be something that I will finish and wear more in the fall. So that was the Lulu slipover, and then the last I have 2 more whips that I want to share. The next one is a cast on. It's the No Frills Sweater, also by Petite Knit. So the No Frills Sweater is a top-down raglan construction stockinette sweater. It's a very basic piece, and it's something that I've always wanted to knit since I started knitting, but just because it's so basic, I always would just start other projects. But I have this navy blue yarn here that I really love, and so I just thought it would look beautiful in just a basic sweater that I could layer on top of basically anything, because it's just such a nice classic silhouette and a pretty thin gauge as well. So it's taking me a while to take out the project because I actually have 2 versions here, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So the yarn that I'm using is Sire Tivini, which is a pretty light fingering weight 100% wool, and then I'm using Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair. I think for the 3rd time I'm sharing this mohair, but I really like it, in the shade navy blue. So I have 2 versions here because I was debating between the cast on. So for the No Frills sweater, what I really like about the sweater is I like the look of raglans on me, and I also like the look of a wider neckband, especially because I feel like my outfits can be a little bit plain sometimes, and I like layering things underneath sweaters and you being able to see it underneath the collar of my outer layer. So with a sweater like this, it's really basic to just wear a white t-shirt or some sort of layer underneath, but I just think it adds a bit of dimension when you can see that underneath the collar. Not that interesting, but I just like the look of that. So that's what drew me to the No Frills sweater. I could have picked the Toasted Tee, which has modifications to work a long sleeve version, but I already had the No Frills sweater. With this first version here, I cast on alternating between a long tail cast on and an Icelandic cast on, because the Icelandic cast on kind of imitates a purl stitch, like there's a purl ridge, and it's more stretchy. So I was alternating between those two for this one, mainly because the pattern calls for a tubular cast on, but whenever I do a tubular cast on, it just looks absolutely horrible when I do it. Like it looks totally stretched out. It doesn't even look like 1x1 rib when I've done it, and I've tried a few times, just it's never really clicked for me. So alternating between that just allows the neckband to be a little bit stretchy, kind of like tubular cast on. But after working a few centimeters, or a decent amount, I guess, of the raglan increases, I put the work onto some stitch holders here, and I tried it on, and the neckband is still a little bit tight. And when I stretch it out like this, I just didn't really like the look of the cast on. So I decided, you know what, I'm gonna give tubular cast on another try, but I'm going to look at different techniques because there's multiple ways of doing it. So I was browsing on YouTube for different techniques for tubular cast on, and I came across this video by Knit with Laura Nelkin. I'll link it down below, and it was a tutorial explaining how to do the tubular cast on with stitch saver or a barber cord, like this cord right here, the ones that you use to put your stitches on hold. You can do a tubular cast on with that. And I was watching the tutorial and I was very fascinated because it looks so much simpler than doing a tubular cast on where you will either cast on right on the needle or you'll use a crochet hook and then you'll do setup rows. So this just looked way easier because you are casting on stitches on your needle and the stitch saver, and then your setup rows are a purl across, a knit across, and then a purl across again. And then you put all of those stitches onto one needle, and then you work your 1x1 rib, and it just looks so simple. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna give that a try. So that was this version here. It's gonna be really hard because I'm working with navy, so I don't even think you're gonna really be able to see it. Maybe I'll try to put some photos, but this is what the 1x1 tubular cast on with the stitch saver looks like. It looks, I think, really good. I really like it. So I worked this sweater with that technique. I ended up casting on with the same needle size as my 1x1 ribbing, so 3mm needles. I think there is probably a better way to do this technique in the round. There's a little bit of a jog on mine because I just followed the tutorial exactly, which was casting on flat. And then for the first round of the 1x1 rib, I just joined it in the round, but there is a little bit of a jog, but I think I can use my tail here and just kind of make it look a little bit better later. And I need to work a few more rounds. I just finished working the short rows on this sweater, and I'm just working now the raglan increases. I need to work a few more rounds before I try this on and see if it fits a little bit differently than the long tail and Icelandic cast on that I did here, but either way it looks a lot better in the tubular cast on. Overall, I'm really impressed with this technique. I'm gonna link it down below so you can watch it and also maybe be pretty fascinated by it. You can do this technique for more than just 1x1 rib. I think there's a tutorial, a standalone tutorial to do the provisional cast on with stitch saver for stockinette. So I may even do that over a Judy's Magic cast on, because with Judy's Magic cast on, when you cast onto a spare needle and cord, the first row is always super fiddly on the when you're working it because of the needle, and then the spare cable is a lot more thick, so I just find that it really gets in the way. But with stitch saver or barber cord, it's really flexible and it's easy to slide your provisional stitches across as you're working that first row. So I may even use this technique over Judy's Magic cast on in the future. So I'm really happy that it worked out and it's so simple. So yeah, we'll see if it fits a little bit different than this one, but regardless, it already looks a lot nicer. So I'm happy with that, and I just have a lot of stockinette to work and raglan increases, which I'm happy with because I just would love to have a nice relaxing stockinette project. So that's where I'm at with the no frills sweater. And then the last whip that I wanted to share is my first sewing project, but it's also a knit project because it is my Marie pillow. So this is where I'm at so far with the Marie pillow. So I have finished sewing the fabric panel on the top and the bottom part of the pillow here, just because it's easier than sewing the sides here. With the slip stitch pattern, you kind of need to sew the fabric panel here at a very straight line because you want it to line up with your garter slip stitch, especially when you're working it in 2 colors. It's very obvious if you don't sew it in a straight line. So it's easier to tell on the top and the bottom if you're sewing in a straight line because you just follow the row. It's a little bit more difficult, I'm finding, to sew in a straight line along the rows here and keeping a straight stitch here. I have threaded in I have threaded in like a thin red cotton thread here to kind of mark where a straight line of stitches would be, but it's still really difficult. So there's that, and then there's also the zipper here. So I've tried sewing this side up a few times now and had to seam rip it because I've just messed up either the row here, it just doesn't look good, or I sew over the zipper teeth. So I might just finish this pillow off by hand sewing these sides, or I might just use my machine and sew up to like here and then hand sew the rest over the zipper, just because I just don't have those skills yet with the sewing machine. But that's where I'm at with this Marie pillow. Technically my first sewing project, not really, but sewing this back panel is my first big sewing project or task, and I'm really happy with it, but made a really dumb mistake along the way. So I will hopefully share in my next podcast episode what I've done with the sides here, or maybe I may not talk about this pillow again because I also have been working on it for a really long time, but that's where I'm at with this pillow. And that was all of the knit whips that I have to share, and I did want to chat about my first sewing project at the end now. So I am sewing the Rosery PJ shorts pattern, which is by Rosery Apparel. So I asked on my Instagram designers and sewists that people really recommended to beginners, and the top 2 that were recommended by far was Sydney Graham or Rosery Apparel. Both of them have patterns, they sell patterns, PDF patterns, and they also have YouTube channels. So I checked out Rosery Apparel, and she has a beginner project, the Rosery PJ Short. It's a free download, so I thought I might as well try it, and I'm using the thrifted cotton sheets for the fabric. And I've started the shorts pattern, but as you can tell, I haven't sewn it together yet because I made a lot of mistakes while cutting out the fabric that I wanted to share, so hopefully others learn from my mistakes. So the first thing is printing out the pattern. So the pattern has 2 options to print. You can print on letter size A4 paper, or you can print on A0 paper, which is a very large sheet of paper, so you don't have to piece all the pages together. You can just cut out your pattern size right away. I decided to print on letter size paper and piece the pages together. I printed at 100% scale, which is recommended to make sure the dimensions are all exact. But for some reason, the one side of the pattern page kind of got cut off, and that was where the arrows are to mark where to line up your pages before you tape them together so you can cut out your size. So one of those sides was missing. I don't really know why, but it was after I already cut out all the edges of the pages and it just wasn't lining up. So if I were to do this again to eliminate frustration, I just would have printed on A0 paper. I have to go to a print shop for that, but I do think it's worth it as a beginner because that was very confusing to try and figure out, and it was really disheartening when the pattern pages weren't lining up. So I would totally recommend that. If you're in Toronto, OCAD University has printing services on larger size paper, and it's very affordable. They list the prices online, so I'm probably going to use them in the future. But yeah, all to say the printing didn't work out very well for this first project. The back panel of the shorts. There's a front panel, a back panel, and then pockets. The back panel just totally wasn't working based off of how I printed the pages. So I ended up just cutting out 4 of the front panels instead. And then I just figured because they're PJ shorts, it's okay if the back isn't slightly bigger. But I also made some pretty dumb mistakes while cutting out the fabric. The first mistake that I made is I didn't cut out the fabric on a table, so I was cutting on the floor, and that was a huge mistake. I was in a lot of pain afterwards. Would definitely cut out fabric on a table, which is like such a dumb, it seems so self-explanatory, but in the moment I was like so concentrated on printing and cutting the fabric, which I was already doing on the floor, that I just didn't think to do it on a table. I would just recommend doing it on a table. And then the second thing is I didn't cut out multiple layers of the fabric. Since I was only cutting out the front panel, I could have just layered 4 layers of fabric together and done the cutout one time, and then they all would have been the same size, the same dimensions, they all would have lined up. But I ended up cutting out each piece in a single layer because I thought that if I messed up, I wouldn't have wasted so much fabric. But the pieces all don't exactly line up, so I think I need to lay them all flat and then just cut again and trim again so they're all even and they're all gonna line up when I'm sewing. So would recommend layering multiple layers of fabric. I think it makes it easier to cut as well. And I would also recommend pinning your paper piece to the fabric. That's also something that I didn't really know and wasn't really shown in the tutorial for this shorts pattern. And it's not the fault of the designer, Rosery Apparel, because I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but it wasn't to me in the moment. I will link some videos down below which show exactly how to pin your pattern pieces to the fabric before cutting them. Again, it's super self-explanatory, and probably if you're a sewist and you're still watching this portion of the video, you're probably like, duh, that's so obvious, but it was not to me in the moment. So I will link those videos because those were really helpful to me to explain exactly how to pin paper patterns to your fabric. So yeah, I would also recommend doing that because I was using just a heavy Notions sewing box, but pinning it would make it a lot easier to be able to cut the fabric out, and also you can pin the multiple layers of fabric together and then just do this one time. It's a lot more exact and you save a lot of time. Yeah, I would highly recommend that. I was getting very frustrated at the end cutting out all of these pieces individually, so I tried to use a rotary cutter as well. I ended up slicing my finger, so that was not great, but I miraculously didn't end up getting any blood on this white fabric at all. But I also am a little bit scared of using the rotary cutter now. I think I'm just gonna stick to scissors as a beginner until I get better at cutting out fabric, because just the rotary cutter can be a little bit unwieldy. It's easier for like when I cut out the pocket pieces here, the rotary cutter along this curve was pretty easy. So I might just reserve the rotary cutter for like curves like that and just stick to scissors when cutting in straight lines as a beginner. So those were all of the mistakes that I've learned with this first project. I haven't even started the sewing yet. Just cutting the fabric was enough for me, and I was just, yeah, feeling very overwhelmed. So I haven't sewed the pieces together, but I'm sure once I start sewing that, I will have more to share as a beginner. So hopefully if you're still watching the podcast at this point, you enjoyed. So thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much if you've reached this point in the video. That's all that I have to share today. Just getting more progress done on a few of my whips, ones that have been around for a number of months, and continuing to learn how to sew, which has been really exciting. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you enjoyed hearing me chat and ramble about all of this, I would love if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video, it really helps. And that way you can stick around for my next podcast episode where I'm going to share more updates on all of these projects. So until then, I won't say happy knitting anymore. I'll be saying happy making.